Good morning, everybody. So welcome. I had a chance to say hello to a few of you out in the hallway. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Susie Ariola, also a proud member of Bill's team. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and give a warm Palm Springs welcome to Mr. Bill Bartman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Susie. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, sit down. We've only got 2 days, and if we spend all that time doing that, then obviously we're wasting time that we should be spending on you, not on me, because we know why you're here. You're here because things aren't so great out there. You're here because there's not as much certainty in life as there used to be. You're here because things aren't quite as predictable as they used to be. And we all know we need to be doing something about it. Now, we know that about you, and you know that about you, and over the next 2 days, we're going to change that. Over the next 2 days, we're going to give you some tools and some guidance and some help so that when you walk out of here 2 days from now, you don't feel that uncertainty you felt when you walked into this room this morning. Because that's what's going on in the world, what's going on in the universe, and those of us who do something about it, those who realize that things are different now than they've ever been before, and that if we're going to succeed now, if we're going to provide for our family, if we're going to take care of the things that are important, then we have to do something different than we've done before. Well, I commend you for knowing that, recognizing it, and being here to do something about it. So as Susie already did for you, let me give you an applause for changing your life. So thank all of you, because it starts right here. I mean, this is the whole process. Everything we're going to do for 2 days is to first show you the mechanics of this industry, to show you what it takes to succeed, what the industry is all about, how we participate in it, and all of the mechanical parts, and there aren't very many. It's going to be easy for you to grasp and comprehend, and we're going to spend 2 full days just taking those little bitty pieces and making them even smaller, carving them up even the more to make sure that every single person in this room absolutely gets it. Now, before we get into that, before we get into the mechanical part, I want to talk about a couple of things. There's 2 parts of this that you really kind of need to understand how we do our business, how we teach other people how to do what it is that Kathy and I, my now wife of going on 38 years, have been so successful in doing. And it's really pretty simple. And the first part of it is you need help. So I brought my team with me, and for the next 2 days, they're your team. This isn't about me impressing you for 2 days that I know something about this industry. I already know I know something about this industry, and I don't need to impress anybody. I'm not here to impress you, I'm here to help you. And to help you, it's about you, not about me. So it isn't about big words, it isn't about my vocabulary, it isn't about who I know and where we met. It's about how much I can transmit to you. How much can I give you that you get? Because no matter how much I give you, if you don't get it, I have failed. So my job is to give it to you in small enough bites that everybody gets it. Now, I'm not going to go so slow that some of you are going to get bored. I'm going to try and pace this. And part of my experience, part of practicing law for a while, is that you learn how to read a jury. You learn how to watch an audience. You learn how to watch a crowd. Now, lawyers have to do it out of the side view, which is why in law school they teach you peripheral vision, which is the way I passed all my exams, by the way. It worked for me. Well, it works in this environment too, because I get to watch all of you, and I can tell if I need to pick it up. I can tell if I need to slow it down. So I'll be watching for you. So if you're like Sunday at church, if you kind of doze off, don't worry, I'm not going to throw any eraser at you, but I will now start speeding it up if I think that's what it needs to be done. So all of this, at the end of the day, is just simply about you. Us taking some very simple mechanical processes and showing them how they work so that you can understand them. Well, the mechanical steps are easy. There's only 5 parts of this business, and I'm going to show you each one of those 5 parts very specifically over the course of the next 2 days. We're going to take each one at a time, and I'm going to walk you through them and show you exactly what they consist of. what this business is and how do you find the right kind and type of loans and who do you buy them from and how do you bid, and how do you borrow money, which is the most important part, and then ultimately how do you collect them. I'm going to show you all of that. But there's one other preliminary thing you've got to understand before we start. See, success has three components to it, in my opinion. And I study successful people, and I know something about this. You have to be at the right place at the right time. If you're not, I don't care much about the rest of it. If you're not at the right place at the right time, you're probably not going to be very successful. And we'll talk about you being at the right place at the right time right now. You also have to be able to use the tools that are required for success. You have to know how to take advantage of that opportunity. Just being at the right place at the right time isn't enough. You have to do something about that being at the right place at the right time. So over 2 days, we're going to teach you those tools. We're going to give them to you. We're going to show you how to take advantage of being at the right place at the right time. And the third part of any success, and every success, and I think of it as an example, there's like a little toggle switch in our brain. There's a little thing that's either turned on or turned off. Now for you, everyone in this room, you're here. So you already have moved that toggle switch over. You've already moved it to a place where you're now wanting to go forward. Well, most of us in life, we have some baggage behind us. We have some mistake, we have some screw up, we have something that went wrong, we have something that didn't work quite the way we wanted it to work. And for most of us, we drag that behind us. Well, I want to spend just a couple of minutes this morning talking about that because it's one of the keys to success. Getting over the stuff in our own history. And it kind of is more easily explained like this. We have all heard that expression that we learn more from our failures than we have from our successes. How many people have heard that? And I think it's just one of those truisms that we get. Well, Kathy, my wife for 38 years, doesn't believe that. Kathy has said, Bill, if you had learned from all of your mistakes, you'd be a hell of a lot smarter by now. And she's right. She's right. I have not learned from all my mistakes. But fortunately for me and for her and for you, I have made so many of them. I have screwed up so much. I have failed so often. I've been in the wrong place at the wrong time more than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And because I've made so many mistakes and because I've gotten it wrong so many times, I in fact have learned something that most people haven't learned because they weren't there. They didn't screw up bad enough to learn this. And what I learned is that there's one absolute secret to success. And the absolute secret to success is you have to be willing to take risk. Now, some people don't agree with that. Some people say, well, I just want to sit here and wait for the fairy godfather or godmother to show up and sprinkle pixie dust on me. No, in order to be successful, we have to take risk. But here's the problem with this. See, most people are afraid to take risks because they're afraid they will fail. And most people are afraid they will fail because they worry about what other people think about them. And most people worry about what other people think about them because they suffer from low self-esteem. Now, that word self-esteem, some people, kind of denigrate that because it did get hijacked, and now it kind of means a whole bunch of things to a whole bunch of different people. So if you're more comfortable using words like confidence or self-belief or some other terminology, I'm perfectly good at that. I'm going to use self-esteem. It's a word I've learned that has the most meaning for me. And it's because we don't have a real good view of ourselves, a real good vision of who we are and what we're capable of doing, that we are afraid to take risk. And because we're afraid to take risk, we kind of don't put ourselves in a place where we can succeed. Think of what would happen if we could get to a place where we actually believed we were competent, we actually believed we were capable, we actually believed we could do something, even in spite of all of the things that have gone wrong previously in our life. We wouldn't be afraid to take risk. And if in life, if you are willing to take some, and I'm not talking about jumping off cliffs, I'm not talking about doing stupid stuff, I'm talking about just taking calculated risk like you would in a logical, thoughtful process. When you can do that, you put yourself in a position of success. Now, you can say, well, Bartman, what do you know about self-esteem? Well, I know a little bit, and I've written a book on self-esteem, but I don't think it's because I've written a book on self-esteem that I'm an authority on it. And I have a degree in psychology, and I don't think that's a reason why I'm an authority on self-esteem. I think I am an authority on self-esteem because I've lived it. I have personally seen both sides of low and high self-esteem. I saw the face of low self-esteem as a child growing up in welfare and poverty. I saw it as a young boy growing up in a rough, tough neighborhood where I got beat up almost every single day of my life. And I'm not talking about slapping around. I'm talking about beat down, beat ups. I saw it as a 14-year-old kid who left home. I saw it as a high school dropout. I saw it as a teenage alcoholic. I saw it as a member of a street gang. I saw it as a 17-year-old kid laying in a hospital bed just scared to death because I was paralyzed from my waist on down. I saw it as a young man who lost his job. I saw it as a businessman whose business failed. I saw it as a husband and a father who couldn't afford to take care of his wife and 2 small daughters. I saw it as a person sitting there contemplating whether or not he would commit suicide. I've seen the face of low self-esteem. Now, you guys look like you need Prozac. No, it's okay. It's okay. The story has a happy ending. No, it does. It does. But since I've already depressed you and have you down here, let me just go a little further. Let me put a little color on it. I'm one of 8 kids. My dad is a janitor. My mom cleaned other people's houses for a living. And they were good and honorable people, but they didn't make enough money to feed all 10 of us. So we got by on handouts from Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, and welfare. By the time I was 14 years old, we had moved in and out of 8 different rent houses. Now, some of those rent houses were, as you can imagine, pretty bad shape. In 2 of them, we got kicked out by the city because the city said they were unfit for human habitation. Now, in our neighborhood, we didn't think of a dog as a pet. In our neighborhood, a dog was a survival tool. Because you see, a good dog will keep the rats off you at night. And that was the life I was living at 14. At 14, I said, I've had enough of that, and I left home. I didn't run away, and they didn't throw me out. I just left. I'm not sure they knew I was gone, and I'm not sure I cared. Nobody was mad. It was just the state of affairs. That was the way my life was at 14. So at 14, I went and lived on the street. And I've lived under a bridge viaduct. I've eaten out of a dumpster. I've lived at a John 3:16 mission. I've lived at a YMCA. I spent one whole summer living in a farmer's hayloft until he discovered me and burned the few clothes that I had left. So then, still at 14, I joined a traveling carnival. And for the next 2 years, I traveled the United States alone as a carny. Now, I learned a lot of things that a 14-year-old boy shouldn't have to learn. And by 16, I had enough of that. By 16, I said, I've got to change and upgrade and get away from where it is I am. So I improved my stature by joining a street gang. Now, most of you wouldn't think that to be much of an improvement, but for the first time in my life, it was in a place where I felt protected. It was in a place where I felt somebody had my back, where I felt it was a place that maybe I wouldn't be in that bad place all the time. And so for the next 2 years, I was a member of a gang called the Manor Boys. And there was about 40 of us all together. We lived in an abandoned house. And I don't know if you remember the movie Oliver. It's a pretty old movie now. But it was about a bunch of street waifs, just kids living on the street. Well, that's what we were. No adult supervision, just a whole bunch of kids. And now, during the 2 years that I was a Manor Boy, I learned 2 things, and I learned them really, really well. I learned how to fight, and I learned how to drink. And by the time I was 17, I was a raging alcoholic. Now, you can imagine if you're a drunk and a carny, that going to school wouldn't be important. And going to school wasn't important, at least not for me then. I had spent 5.5 years in high school without graduating. By the time I was a junior the second time, I was still reading at the 5th grade level. I remember once they put me in a thing called remedial reading, and I didn't know what the word remedial even meant, but it was a big word, and I was impressed. I thought I got promoted. I went and told all my friends, and they congratulated me, because they didn't know either. And at 17, I decided that I was going to join the U.S. Marine Corps, thinking that would straighten me up and change my life. And they rejected me. Said I couldn't hear in this ear and I'm deaf in this one, and wouldn't let me in. Gave me a 4F classification. So if you haven't noticed, I wear hearing aids, and I can't still, even with them, I can't hear very well. So over the course of the next couple of days, we're going to get a chance to visit a lot, I hope. If at any point in time I'm giving you that Ray Charles look, that means I'm just not picking up your wavelength. You're going to have to jack it up a little bit. And that's just my defect. It's not yours, but work with me here because I'd want to hear what it is you have to say. I just don't hear very good. Well, all of that, all the way up to 17, still put me in a place where I was in a bad place. And it was then that I learned a couple of lessons. Short, little bitty lessons that I want to share with you because they're just powerfully simple. And all things in life that are valuable are simple. People who try to make things complex and complicated are usually trying to impress you. It's the simple things in life that are the most valuable. Well, I learned some simple little bitty things. 3 of them, I'll share them with you. The first, and this is really important, the only opinion of you that matters is your own. The only opinion of you that matters is your own. The heck with theirs. Oh, everybody has one of you. And they may have seen you screw up. They may have seen you fail. They may have seen you be at the wrong place at the wrong time doing the wrong thing. And they may even have a right to say what it is they're saying, but that isn't you. That's a snapshot of you. That was that one Kodak moment when you did do something wrong, when you did end up in the wrong place. But that isn't really who you are. The who you really are is the sum and substance of everything you've done, not just 1 or 2 things. And mostly we don't honor that. Mostly we're taught to remember all the bad things we've done. So if you put them on a scale, we put all of the stuff we did wrong up here, and we remember that every single day of our life is like dragging a tin can behind a wedding car. We every day want to tell everybody how many times we screwed up. Every day we're afraid somebody's going to find out. Every day we make a big deal out of it. But over on the other side of life, all the times we've done something well, done something right, we don't talk about that at all. We kind of act like that's not important. We act like we're not supposed to talk about the good things we've done. We're just supposed to talk and think about the bad things that have happened in our life. Well, I tell you, that's wrong. That's twisted thinking. We should honor the things we've done wrong. We should learn from them. We should accept them. We should admit them. We shouldn't be in denial about them. But we should also look at all of the times we did it well and right. All the times we succeeded, all the times we didn't fail, all the times we made ourselves happy, all the times we made somebody else happy, all the times we made ourselves proud or somebody proud of us, all those times we did something good, we should look at those too. And if you saw both of these exactly in confluence, both at the same time, you would see who you really are. Not this, but this. And then we would finally, for the first time in our life, for most of us, have the real opinion of who and what we really are. Mistakes and all, warts and all. Well, the second thing I learned is that in order to be really successful, and that's what I want for all of you here. I don't want regular successful. I don't want normal successful. I don't want just a little bit of success. I want us to get all the success we can possibly get. Well, if we're going to do that, then we have to know the second element. The second element is you have to learn how to forgive. No, this isn't some preachy thing. This isn't about religion or theology. This is about business. This is about basic, simple business. If you're going to succeed in business, if you're going to succeed in life, you've got to learn how to forgive the people who messed with you. My dad was a 3rd grade graduate and a janitor. So obviously he wasn't a very intelligent man in the academic world. He certainly wasn't very sophisticated. But my dad taught me a lot. And one of the things he used to say, and he had a lot of old expressions, but one of them was, you can't go forward looking backwards. Now, when my dad said that, I thought that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, which we usually say about our fathers. That's stupid stuff. I mean, it's kind of like the old Mark Twain quote. Remember that? The one that goes, when I was 14, my father was so ignorant I couldn't stand to be around him. By the time I was 21, I was surprised how much he had learned in 7 years. Well, that's the way we are as kids. Mostly we disrespect. And so I, too, disrespected and thought, what does my dad know? What do you mean you can't go forward looking backwards? that's stupid. Until finally the light bulb went on and I realized what he was talking about. Until you forgive whomever it is that did whatever it is they did, you're looking backwards. You're living in last week, last month, last year, last decade, whenever it happened, and it really did happen. And it really irritated you, and it's real. But as long as you're focusing on that, you can't possibly be focusing on where you ought to be going. So if you want to go forward, you got to quit looking backwards. You got to learn how to forgive. And in my world, I've learned you have to learn how to forgive 3 people. You have to learn how to forgive all those people who did what it is they did. And you know who they are. You probably could write a list of them right now. As I've been talking, you've already made your little checklist of the people in your life you think of as jerks. And mostly it's because they have messed with you one way or the other. You have to learn how to forgive them, and that's going to be hard. But until you do, you're not going to succeed. The second group of people you have to learn how to forgive are those who didn't do anything. You say, well, why am I forgiving somebody who didn't do anything? Because in our lives, there were people who were supposed to have done something and didn't. They weren't there for us when we needed them. They weren't there when we counted on them. They didn't protect us when they might have and should have. Now, why? Who cares? Forgiveness isn't about trying to figure it out. Forgiveness is just about doing it. You just forgive them. And the third person you have to learn how to forgive is yourself. Because every one of us have screwed up. We have screwed up big time. We've screwed up in 100 different ways. We've screwed up in our businesses, our health, our relationships. Pick a category. We've all done it. Everybody has. Quit acting like you're pregnant and alone. You aren't the first person to have screwed up. You won't be the last one. Everybody does it, but most of us are dragging it around like a boat anchor, and it's slowing down our progress. And I'm not saying we have to get in denial. We should act like it didn't happen. Quite to the contrary. You've heard my mistakes. I've got more. I'll share more with you over the course of the next 2 days. I'm not ashamed of them. To me, each and every one of them was a learning experience. Each and every one of them was an opportunity to put me right here today. Each and every one of them is who I am. So there's nothing wrong with any part of them. Oh, do I wish I hadn't done some of them? Of course I do, but it's too late. So the only choice I get left is whether I drag it around behind me or whether I cut it loose. Well, cutting it loose is a freedom that some of you have yet to experience. And when it happens, it pushes you forward. Now, the third item. So there was 3 things. The only opinion of you that's important is your own. You have to learn how to forgive. And there's a third one. That everything in life is a choice. Everything in life is a choice. We think we don't have choices sometimes. We think we have to get up, we have to go to work, we have to do this, we have to do that. We don't have to do any of it. Oh, there are consequences if we don't, and we will pay those consequences, but the point is we have a choice. If we're prepared to pay the consequence, we should make the choice. We, in our business life, our personal life, have to come to understand that everything that's happened to us is a result of choices we've made. You say, well, Bill, what about Hurricane Katrina? Or Bill, what about parentage? Or what about geography or ethnicity or things that we have no control over? Fine, I'll give you some of the majors if you want them. But at the end of the day, we know those aren't the things that stop you from being successful. Because other people with the same geographies, the same Katrina stories, they've succeeded. So it isn't that it meant everybody that was in that environment has to be a victim. It means there must be something else going on, and that is that we haven't made the choice to move away from it. When the girls were growing up, you've met Megan, you have not yet met Jessica, when they were growing up, whenever they would leave the house, whenever they would go anywhere, when they're going to a sleepover at their friends or to the mall or to wherever it is they were really going, in spite of where they told us they were going, whenever they would leave the house, we would say 2 words to them. We didn't say, love you. That'd be 2 words. And we did love them. And we always wanted them to know we loved them. But that wasn't it. And we didn't say, be careful. That's 2 words. And we did really want them to be careful. We didn't want them to be at risk. No, the 2 words we said every time they left were choose wisely. Every time they left the house, we would say, choose wisely. Because we knew they were going to go in a world, they were going to go in an environment, they're going to go with their friends, they're going to go with their peers, they're going to go do some stuff, and quite frankly, they're probably going to do some stupid stuff. And they're probably going to be in places where stupid stuff is happening. And we wanted them to know no matter who they were with, no matter what was going on, they had the right to choose what they were going to do. Now, I don't think they made perfect decisions every single time, because nobody ever has. So I expect there's some stories I still haven't heard about some things that they did or didn't do, well, much to our chagrin. But the point is, every time they left, they were reminded they had the right to choose. Now, in life, as you know, as you grow older and your kids grow up, funny how things turn around. Well, now when Kathy and I leave, Megan and Jessica tell us to choose wisely. And to their chagrin, we probably disappoint them on occasion by not doing some of the things, or maybe doing things they wish we hadn't done. But those three things, simple little bitty things, things that you already know you have the power to change in your life, how you think about yourself, to forgive or not to forgive, and to understand you have the capacity to choose, those three things made a big difference in my life. They took me from a life of bankruptcy and poverty to become the 25th wealthiest person in America. Now, I don't care how you count, but that's a lot of money. And that's a pretty good transition. They took me from a high school dropout to becoming a lawyer. Now I'm in remission. I haven't practiced in 30 years, so don't hold that against me. And it took me from a kid who ran away at 14 and joined a traveling carnival to be named the National Entrepreneur of the Year twice by NASDAQ, USA Today, Inc. magazine, and a whole bunch of other people. And then they went even further. They inducted me into the thing called the Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. And just when you think it can't get any better, then they went even further. Then they named me to a list of the top 100 entrepreneurs in the last 100 years. They put me on a list alongside of a guy named Henry Ford. And I'm telling you, my girls would have been more impressed if it would have been Harrison Ford. But these three things, these same three things, then took me from a drunk gang member to being awarded a permanent place in the Smithsonian Institute's Museum of American History for information technology that we later created that literally transformed an entire industry. And it took me from riding a city bus to flying my own $25 million Gulfstream jet. And it took me from drawing unemployment, yes, I've drawn unemployment, I know what that's like, to hiring and employing more than 10,000 people. Three little bitty things. Three things you just have to turn on in your head. Now remember, I said that's part of the program. You have to be at the right place at the right time. You have to be able to use the tools that we're going to give you, but you have to turn on that toggle switch in your head. Well, I've given you now what it is you need to turn the toggle switch on. So let's talk about being at the right place at the right time. In 1986, I was lucky. Kathy and I were broke. That was our good luck. We were so damn broke, we didn't care what we did next, because all we're worried about is feeding ourselves and feeding our children and paying the bills and trying not to get evicted. And our automobiles had already been repossessed by the IRS. We were being sued by a whole bunch of people. We're in the middle of bankruptcy at a FICO score of 430. There are dead people who have a better FICO score than 430. So, I appreciate all of your stories and all of your conditions and all the places you're at. I get it. I get it because I've been there. I understand it because I've been there. Well, that's where we were at. We were at the right place at the right time. We were broke and we were desperate. And we saw an opportunity, and because we were broke, we were willing to take the risk because we had, as they would say, little or nothing to lose. Now, in a different world, if I was still practicing law back then, if I still had a clientele, if I still had a booming practice, which I had left to go and get into the oil and gas business, and that's always a mistake, by the way. Anytime somebody tells you to get in the oil and gas business, don't do it. Take it from Uncle Bill. It's a real risky business, more risk than any of us would want. Well, if I had been comfortable, if I had been in that good place in life, I wouldn't have seen the opportunity. So right now, while you're thinking maybe you're not at the right place and maybe it's kind of hard out there and maybe you're challenged and maybe life is a struggle for you, that means you're at the right place. That means you're now at a place where you really want to go make something new, different happen in your life. Well, mine started in 1986. Yours can start in 2010. Because the other variable, not just our own, but the economy, is now exactly the same. The economy that brought me and Kathy the opportunity that we rode up to $1 billion opportunity is exactly the same economy that you're staring at right now. It's the same kind of unemployment, the same kind of bankruptcy statistics, the same kind of mortgage foreclosures, the same kind of almost everything. It's almost a complete overlay. If you compared one to the other, they look so much alike you couldn't tell which one's which. Well, that is now the opportunity for you to be at the right place at the right time to take advantage of it. And as we're going to talk in just a moment, there are so many things you can do to take advantage of this economy that we didn't serve up. We didn't create this bad economy. We didn't make it what it is. Now, whether we want to blame it on George Bush or Barack Obama or George Washington, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. This isn't about politics, and no point during the next 2 days you're going to hear me tell you that I care who did what to whom. I only care about how we take advantage of it. How do we take advantage of the situation that currently exists? I don't say take advantage of people, to take advantage of the situation. If we do it well and right, we aren't going to take advantage of any one. We're going to help a whole bunch of people. We're going to show them a way through and out of this dilemma that they now find themselves in. So those three things take us to the first part, and that is what's going on out there in the industry. Well, let me show you why you are exactly at the right place right now. While we spend time together over the next 5 days, we're really going to talk about 5 things, because there's only 5 moving parts to this entire business. Now, when you think about a puzzle, mostly what people get to in their head, they think about, a complicated 1,000-piece puzzle where you pour it out on a table and stays there for a month while you're working on just trying to find the borders. No, I'm talking about a child's puzzle. I'm talking about a puzzle with 5 pieces in it. And they're different color, and they're different shapes, and they're very recognizable. These are the kind of things that my grandchildren could put together in no time at all because they're that simple. Well, that's how simple this business is. If we just understand these simple parts of this opportunity and this business, where do we find the loans? How do we evaluate them? How do we bid on them? How are we going to pay for it? And then how do we get them collected once we're done? If we could just figure those things out, then all of this begins to make so much more sense. Well, let me show you what you already know. And we know this intuitively, all of you. This happens to be an older newspaper, but the numbers have only gotten worse. This is a November Wall Street Journal, and it's talking about the number of people, in this case, in 3 major states. Nevada, 65% of the homeowners are underwater. Arizona, 48%, Florida, 45%. Or said differently, across the United States, 25% of the homeowners are underwater. Their house is worth less today than they owe on it. The unemployment rate stuck now at about 9.6%. And you'll see and hear people talk about, the unemployment numbers came down last week. It's still at 9.6%. So if indeed they did come down a little bit, fine. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that the unemployment rate right now is staggering across the United States. The bankruptcy rate in this country is increasing. But if you remember back in 2005, there was a bankruptcy law change. I don't know if you were paying attention back then, but let me give you a brief history of it. In 2003, the Congress decided they wanted to pass a new bankruptcy law to make it harder for people to file bankruptcy. The credit card companies thought that was a really great idea. And for the next 2 years, they debated and argued what that legislation would look like, and it finally passed in 2005. Well, because there was a 2-year warning that it was coming, many people who otherwise were prone or disposed to file bankruptcy hurried up and rushed to the bankruptcy attorney before the end of 2005 to hurry up and file. Kind of like cash for clunkers. Do you remember that one? where everybody that wanted to buy a used car hurried up and bought one while there was a heck of a deal on it. And then the next several months thereafter, there was nobody left to buy a used car. So the numbers ramped right up and then fell straight off the cliff thereafter. Well, so too then after 2005, the bankruptcy rate fell down to a very, very low number because most of those who wanted to had already taken advantage of it, and it was in fact harder after 2005. The rules did in fact change. But lo and behold, since 2005, look at the stair step. Look at what's going on. Even though it is now harder, we're almost back to the old numbers. And that means this economy obviously is in a stinky environment. Now, again, you don't need me to stand up here and tell you that. What we want to do is talk about how we're going to take advantage of it. So back in 1986 and then the next 13 years that followed, Kathy and I have always believed that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We said nobody could get that lucky to ever do it again. Nobody could be standing on the right street corner at the right time, at the right place, and in the right situation to take advantage of a situation as well as we had. We just didn't think it could ever happen again until the last year and a half. 2 years ago is when I started teaching other people how to do what it is we did. I started teaching, just like you, people to say, here's what Kathy and I did, here's how you can take advantage of it, here are the mechanics, here are the tools, here are the things you're going to need in order to do this. But over the last year, we decided to change that program. Over the last year, we decided this opportunity is so good, this opportunity is so big, this opportunity is so rich that we are now back in it with our students to go do it again. So the big change, the big thing that some of you don't know is we aren't just teaching. In fact, we are about to quit teaching because the number of partners that we have in the program now are taking more of my time. So as we create CFS2, we literally stop doing this front end and start doing the back end. So we aren't just teaching this opportunity, we are practicing this opportunity. And over the course of the next 2 days, I'll tell you exactly how we're doing it. But in the old one, we took a $13,000 loan. You've heard the story that we were broke and destitute and borrowed $13,000 is all we could get. Bought a box of loans from the FDIC, took that box of loans home, and started calling those customers, and I didn't call them deadbeats, call them customers. We called those people up and treated them with dignity and respect. And by treating them with dignity and respect, you can say, well, Bill, that sounds corny, it sounds Pollyannish, it sounds like you're Opie on Mayberry. No, if you come to know me, I'm not Opie and I'm not in Mayberry. I live in a pretty rough and tough world. I live in a pretty big world with lots of things going on in it, but I've come to understand there's some basic, simple principles. And if you treat people with dignity and respect, you treat them well, mostly people respond. Oh, will you get your wheels knocked off on occasion? Yeah. There'll be times when people take advantage of your good nature. There'll be times when people abuse you because you've been nice and kind to them. But most of the time, they won't. So in 1986, starting with a $13,000 loan, we bought a box of loans home, plunked it on the table, and the only thing we knew about the collection industry was how not to do it. Because we had been collected upon by some really mean, ugly, nasty people. And our vow, our promise to ourselves is that we were going to do it differently by treating people with dignity and respect. Within 2 months' time, we collected $63,000 out of that box that we paid $13,000 for. Now, 50 grand isn't a lot of money, unless you happen to be me and Kathy at that moment in our life. At that moment in our life, we thought we died and went to heaven. At that moment in our life, we thought, wow, we actually have enough money to pay, the mortgage. We have enough money to buy groceries. We have enough money to buy school clothes and books for our kids. Now, our aspirations weren't that high. All we wanted to do was get through. But we made 50 grand in 2 months sitting at our kitchen table by ourselves working on a rotary telephone. And that's not an exaggeration. Remember this? One of those kind of phones, all of you who are old enough. And then we had them to ask and answer the next question. Did we just get lucky, or is there a long-term opportunity? And that's a heck of a question when you don't know. When you're the pioneer, when you're the first guy to ever buy a box of loans and nobody else has ever done it, there's no book, there's no role model, there's no tutor, there's nobody to ask because nobody knows, nobody's ever done it. So we're sitting there saying, did we just get lucky? Or is there a bigger opportunity? Well, we opted, as you would know the story, to say, let's go do it again. So we went back to the same bank, and this time because we were successful, because we had a history, we went back to the bank and asked them not for another $13,000, but instead $100,000. And we increased it and bought a bigger box of loans and took them home and collected them, and again and again and again and again. And over the course of the next 12 years, we turned that $13,000 starting business into a $3 million a day business. $3 million a day. Now, we obviously had moved off the kitchen table by then, which is where, where Russ and Kelly and others came into our life and grew a company with 4,000 employees. But it started exactly where you're starting. It started with nothing. It started with no more than a desire. It started with no more than an aspiration. It started with no more than pocket change, as some people would call it. And we did it until we could prove we could do it, and then we did it bigger, and then we did it bigger, and then we did it bigger. Now, the good news for you, the same opportunity is absolutely there in front of us. Now, when you get in this business, and that's why you're here, and we know why you're here, there are people out in this industry who will take advantage of you. Welcome to the world. That's the way life is. If they think you are uninformed or ignorant, and I'll use that word lovingly, meaning you just don't know, and you give them signals or clues that you are ignorant, they will try to take advantage of you. They will try to sell you stuff you shouldn't be buying. They'll try to talk you into deals you shouldn't be doing. It's kind of like walking into a used car salesman and believing everything they tell you. That would be foolish. Well, we don't want to give clues as to what we don't know, and you all are at the early stage of learning, so I want to give you a little bit of history, just a couple of minutes worth, so that you see some of the things that have happened before, so that when you get out there and communicate with people, you don't expose ignorance. And it's just a way of giving you some of the catchphrases and some of the guidance so that you don't look like you just started. Well, let me take you back to the Great Depression. When the Great Depression happened in from 29 to 33, the government intervened. It decided to create two organizations, among others, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which did most of what you later learned as the New Deal and the Works Progress Administration, and that's only important so you know it from a historical point of view, but it also created an organization called the Fdic, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Because if you remember, the Great Depression was mostly caused by runs on banks. Customers had savings accounts at banks and wanted it back, and they all went at the same time, and there wasn't enough money for all of them to get their money at the same time. And so banks collapsed and failed, banks collapsed and failed, businesses collapsed and failed right behind them, and the whole economy collapsed and failed. So the government said, never again will we allow that to happen. So they created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that now insures deposits up to $250,000. So even though banks are failing now, we'll talk about the number in just a moment, nobody's losing money because the government has decided to backstop them. So that was the Great Depression. And then we go back to the 1980s and the 90s. In the 1980s and 90s, when Kathy and I did ours, there was two ways for the government to dispose of the loans that they take over from failed banks. And the way the process works is really pretty simple. But when a bank fails, usually a rescuing bank comes in and buys the deposits or the good stuff, and then the bad stuff, the bad loans, are sitting there. And most smart banks who are buyers of the failed bank, they don't want to touch that toxic waste. They don't want to touch that junk, the bad loans, so they leave them on the table, and the Fdic has to take them home. And the Fdic, as it closes down bank after bank after bank, accumulates more and more and more and more of these bad loans. Well, that's what was happening in 1986. Only the Fdic had no place to sell it. So fortunately for me, the very first sale by the Fdic was done in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now talk about being at the right place at the right time. Had it been almost anywhere else inside the United States, I might not have seen the ad in the newspaper. And as I purchased the first one, other people started buying the second, the third, and the 10th one, and the FDIC figured out they had a winner. That they figured out they could then shut down banks and sell off the bad loans to people like you and me. Well, that opportunity only lasts while banks are failing. So as the bank crisis started healing back in the mid-90s, as the bank crisis ended, another one started. It was the savings and loan crisis. And some of you will remember it was a pretty big deal. But it was different than the FDIC, and it started with an organization called the Resolution Trust Corporation. And they did essentially the same thing. They disposed of assets that were acquired then from savings and loans that had failed. And to give you a frame of reference, words are good, pictures are better. If you look at the far right-hand side, that's what the bank failure rate looked like in the 1929-33 era. That little bitty mound over there in the beginning of the chart is what our parents and grandparents called the Great Depression. That Manhattan skyscraper, if you were to think of it that way, is what happened in the 80s and the 90s. And that'll blow most of your minds because most of us wouldn't have thought that's what it was going to look like at all. We'd have thought the Great Depression was really great. Well, actually, the Great Depression wasn't that great. The thing that happened the last time was really, really great. Well, and you can see already what's going on presently. The last spike on the far left-hand side is what's happening right now. Those are the bank failures that have already happened. But the good news for us is we can look down the road. The good news for us, after having done this for 26 years, we have a pretty good crystal ball of what's going to happen next. Having analyzed 800 failed banks, having done the statistical research on 7,940 banks in the United States, and we publish it every week. So we're tracking every single bank in America, because this is what we do. This is how you make money. You learn things about institutions, and so you know which way they're going. Well, when we look at where the banking industry in America is going, we see that red line. We see that's what's likely to occur over the next 5 years. More bank failures in dollars, not institutions, because who cares how many brick buildings are empty? It's how many dollars are involved that you measure. Over the next 5 years, we project 1,000 banks will fail, and that we're going to be looking at a larger dollar denomination than we saw back in the last one or in the Great Depression. Now, the evidence for that is pretty uncontrovertible. This is the FDIC troubled bank list. The FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, has a list of the banks that it thinks are in trouble. Now, they're the insurance company for the banking industry. They regulate the banking industry. They have access to all the information. And so when the FDIC, tells you that banks are likely to fail or are in trouble, however you want to use that word, and the list keeps increasing, there are now 829 banks as of today on the FDIC's troubled bank list. Now, specifically, not all of those 829 will fail. Some will get rescued. Some will have a white knight show up. Some will find some capital somewhere. Some will sell some stock. Some will get lucky, as they say. But most of them, and others that aren't on the list over the next short period of time, are probably going to find themselves failing. One more graph. If you want to see what that looks like and why this is such a great opportunity for you and me right now, is that green line is the bank failures in 2008. So in 2008, you can see there was an increase in the number of banks that failed. The blue line is 2009, and you can see it began to accelerate. The red line is 2010. Now, whether you understand anything about economics is immaterial. You can see the picture of what's going on in the United States right now. Now, that's all good news. Good news for us if we're on the right side. Bad news if you happen to own bank stock. Bad news if you happen to be a banker. And if you are, that's kind of like not a very chosen profession at the moment. I feel sorry for you. So let's talk about why this is such a great opportunity. And it's just basic, simple, common sense propositions, reasons that everybody will get. And it's as simple as the law of supply and demand. When you pump this much money into the economy, bad things happen. Now, whether you're in favor of what George Bush did in 2008 or what Barack Obama did in 2009, yes, both of them had a bailout program. So anybody who thinks it was just one guy, not the other guy, you're mistaken. Congress, had a $700 billion TARP, Troubled Asset Resolution Program. They put $300 billion behind FHA, $200 billion behind Freddie and Fannie, the $200 billion more behind a Fed term auction facility, $185 billion to your friends and mine over at AIG, $147 billion in mortgage-backed securities, $87 billion that went to Lehman Brothers before the JP Morgan buyout, $50 billion to commercial paper, $29 billion to Bear Stearns, and $25 billion is stuck in the automobile industry. Now, whether you agree with them or not, it's immaterial. That's the law of supply and demand. When you start pushing that much money into any part of the economy, something else has to give. The second economic stimulus came right behind it, another $817 billion. So what you get, firstly, is this oversupply of money, which allows banks to dispose of their bad loans differently than they would do it in a vacuum. And the second part you get is the seller's not the owner. Now, for all of you who've ever purchased real estate, and some of you have, when you're buying a house from the homeowner, that's a hard negotiation because a homeowner grew up there, their kids grew up there, they probably have little pencil marks on a door jamb somewhere measuring the height of their children, and they have all those memories. But if you're buying a piece of property from an investor, it's just brick and mortar. They don't have an emotional attachment. Well, in this case, when we're buying loans from the federal government, they don't have any emotional attachment. They're not the owner. They are the ones the government's the one who's charged with liquidating the banks. As I mentioned, 140 banks failed last year, 125 so far, including last Friday, 829 that are on the troubled list right now, and our projections for 2011 is the number hits 1,000. So more inventory coming every single day. Now, if you want a metaphor for this, and this, let me apologize in advance for referring to us as vultures, because some people think vultures are mean and nasty and ugly, and they may not be cosmetically pretty, but a vulture is charged with cleaning up somebody else's mess. A vulture does not kill anything. A vulture will not eat a live animal. A vulture only eats dead stuff. And whether we think they're pretty or not is certainly not much to argue about. They're pretty ugly. But they provide a value and a service. They clean up stuff. They clean up messes that somebody else made. Well, in a way, we're going to be a little bit like that. And I know that sounds like a nasty connotation, but think about a vulture circling over a dead rabbit. And the vulture's flying at 1,000 feet up in the air, and it looks down and sees the dead rabbit and says, okay, good, a meal. It says, if I go down there, I can clean up, eat up that dead rabbit, and it'll last me an hour or two. Well, we are sitting there in a place where we're looking down and we're seeing a herd of dead elephants. And the inventory level is so remarkably different. We're not just looking down at one little bitty opportunity, we're looking down at a whole gargantuan opportunity that we're going to be able to take advantage of over the next 3 to 5 years. Next is a thing called the Legacy Loan Program, which is the actual way the government is planning on executing that process. And when they do, when they put these loans back out on the street, when they announce them, you're going to see just a grand opportunity for everyone, you, me, and all of us, to use government money to buy these loans. So let's talk about why we ought to be in this business. And you're already here. You spent good money to come and learn this thing. You don't need me to tell you this, but let me show you my reasons why I think you ought to be involved in this business. That's the best one. No, there's more coming, but that's, this isn't like Dave Letterman's top 10 or anything, but let's just stop right there for a second. Because of a unique opportunity. Not because we're so smart, not because we're so good looking, not because of our parents, not because of our color of our skin, not because of anything else, not because of none of that stuff. But because it's being delivered up, we have an opportunity for all of us to do this really unique thing called getting filthy stinking rich. Now, I don't know what filthy stinking means to you, but filthy stinking rich to me means way up there. Not regular rich, not obscene rich, filthy stinking rich, where nobody likes you because you have so much money. I'm good with that. I am perfectly okay with people not liking me if I have enough money. It's bad when you're poor and they don't like you. Then you have nothing. But if you have all this, you can buy some friends or rent them. It's easier. And so we, just again, because we're in the right place at the right time. It has little to do with us other than we're going to learn some tools, we're going to take advantage of the opportunity, but we get this God-given opportunity of circling and looking down and seeing some disaster somebody else created. And all we have to do now is decide, do we want to land and take advantage of it? And the answer for us is yes, absolutely we do. But number two is also a good reason. We can do a massive amount of good. Now, again, not Pollyannish, not Opie, not trying to turn you into Mr. Goody or Mrs. Goody Two-Shoes, but we can help millions of people. Now, the last time around, CFS helped 4.5 million people. We had 4.5 million customers, 4.5 million people whose debt we purchased. We owned their loan. And we bought them for nickels and dimes on the dollars, and we could settle with those individual customers for whatever we chose to. Nobody could tell us not to. No bank regulations applied, no other regulations applied in terms of what discount we could afford to give back to those people to help them get out of the hole they were in. And we helped 4.5 million people, whether that's 3 million families, you never know how the math really works, but a lot of people in America get out of an economic hole. So much, so many, so often that Mother Teresa gave us an endorsement. Now, it's one thing to get an endorsement from a business cohort or a relative or somebody who wants something from you. But when you can get an endorsement and a testimonial from Mother Teresa, not because we made a lot of money, she could care less about the money. What she cared about was what we did from the good side of the equation. See, in my world, those are in perfect balance. I think you can make a lot of money and do a lot of good, and they do not compete with one another. In fact, I think, and I practice, and I have demonstrated, they are perfectly congruent. They are the opposite sides of that sphere. It's like the back half of the moon. We've never seen it, but you got to believe it's there, and if it wasn't holding it up the front half of the moon, we wouldn't see the front half of the moon. Well, so too here, I think those two things are always in balance. So if we want to get filthy, stinking rich, great. I'm going to show you how. If you want to do good, great. I'm going to show you how. If you want to do both, great. They should be together anyhow. Well, this is our opportunity literally to help hundreds, thousands, or maybe, depending on how serious you are about this business, perhaps millions of people get out of the hole. Number three, you don't need your own money. And that's, for me, one of the beauties of this whole business. If you have money, if you have in some capacity, great, it's even easier. You could use your own money. I hope you don't. I'm going to spend all afternoon today on one topic, borrowing money, because I think that's the simple key to success in this industry. Because I don't care how much money you have in your billfold, I don't care who your relatives are, I don't care how much you got socked away somewhere, I'll bet there's a limit on it. I'll bet there's only so much you really have access to. And if that's all you can do is spend that which you have access to, you are limited by that amount. I don't care if it's $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, or $10,000, or $20,000, or whatever the number is, it's a limit. Let's go to places called banks where there is no limit. Let's go to places where they just keep making new all the time. They have these big old printing presses called the Federal Reserve where they just keep spitting it out. And all we have to do is put together a package and a program and a process so that we can convince them to give us their money so we can invest it and buy this kind of type of product. Now, this isn't me doing Babel speak. I started with nothing, from broke, 13,000 bucks, ultimately over the course of the next 12 and a half years, borrowed $3.1 billion. 3.1 billion. Billion. I mean, that's beyond, a kid from Muskogee, Oklahoma's comprehension. I don't know how many zeros there were in a billion. When they told me, I said, that's a lot. And if that's where you're at right now, saying, I don't even know how to talk billions. Good, I'll teach you. It's not that hard, but you can't get there using your own billfold. Oh yeah, it's a shortcut, and that's easy, and some of my students do that. But let's assume we're going to leave our billfold at home. Let's assume that we're only going to use somebody else's money, and then we not only take some of the element of risk out of it, which is a really good thing for me, we also increase the capacity. Well, this business lends itself to do that. Number 4, you can start small. And I encourage that in everything in life. There is no need to rush off and do stupid, silly things. Instead, what we should do is be prudent. And that means anytime we're getting into a new industry, a new endeavor, something where we know we don't know a lot yet, why would we be in a hurry? Let's be patient, let's move at pace, let's move in steps, let's go in increments. Let's start small, we can grow fast. I'll show you how to do that. Number 5, the business is scalable, which means that when you succeed, you can move it up a notch. You can ramp it up as fast as you want once you have a base built underneath you. So this is a business that it doesn't matter what big is to you. In my case, it was 4,000 employees with offices in London and across the United States. Now, that was big for me. Now, if that's big for you, great, there's that kind of room. If you have a smaller target, great. You want to be a one-person operation the rest of your life, that's fine. And I'm good at that. But let me show you how to leverage even being a one-person operation the rest of your life and add some zeros behind it because the business is scalable even if you don't want to end up doing more yourself. Number 6, diversification of risk. And I have made a lot of money in real estate, so I'm not going to speak ill of real estate. I've made a lot of money in lots of different things. But in real estate in particular, you put all your eggs in one basket and you hope. You stick a whole bunch of money in one address and you hope the neighbors next door don't put a refrigerator out on the porch. Or you hope they don't put an overstuffed chair out in the front yard. Or you hope they don't put a tire hanging from a tree. Now, I know all these things because in Muskogee, that seemingly was the way everybody lived. You would buy extra furniture, but you never threw the old stuff out. You just put it on the porch. Well, you can imagine what that does to property values. Well, we've seen enough real estate dilemmas going on, whether it be commercial or residential or otherwise, to know that if we have an opportunity instead to spread risk across a whole bunch of things, knowing that some more bad stuff will likely occur, at least we've taken our eggs and we've put them in lots of different baskets. So when you're buying a box of loans, if it's got 100 loans or 1,000 loans, depending on what size you were to buy, that's 100 or 1,000 different situations. And if some of them file bankruptcy and some of them die and some of them run and hide, you still have all the rest of them to work with. So it isn't like putting all of your money in one thing and then hoping. Diversification's big for me. Number 7, you can exit quickly. I teach every business I've ever been involved with, I teach people very simple concepts. You never should get into a business you don't know how to get out of. If you haven't already figured out the exit strategy, what are you doing there? You need to know how you're going to leave a business. Getting in is simple. Sometimes getting out is a challenge. So I want to put you in a business that you say, if I ever decide I want out, if I ever decide I want to leave, there's a good, quick exit strategy, and this business absolutely provides that. And number 8, no face-to-face selling. You never have to call anybody. You never have to call up these customers to try to collect from them. That'd be silly. You're not a collector. You'd probably be breaking rules and regulations and laws. So instead, we hire somebody that does it for you. Somebody that is licensed, that is professional, that does do it well, that will treat them with dignity and respect. The good news for you is you don't have to do it. Because if you had to do it, this would look like hard work. I don't want you involved in hard work. Number 9, it works best in a bad economy. Well, I think we have a winner. I mean, this is a world-class bad economy. Now, could you think about it just logically? This business doesn't, well, I won't say it doesn't exist because it always stays alive. It's kind of like goes dormant during a really good economy, but it's still there. But it thrives in a bad economy because think of what the inventory is. It's bad loans. In a good economy, there aren't that many bad loans. In a good economy, everybody has money. Everybody's paying their bills. There aren't a lot of bad loans available. But in a bad economy where unemployment goes up and all those other issues are happening, the inventory increases exponentially. And when it does, we get this wonderful, unique opportunity. And number 10, and there are students in this room from Canada, there are students from 3 different continents in this room, and a lot of people from various different states in the United States. It matters not where you do this business from. You can do this business anywhere you have a telephone/laptop computer connection. I mean, this is a business that you're calling up the seller of the loans and entering a bid, whether you do that by computer or by telephone, and then you transfer your money like you would anything else, like you pay your bills electronically or otherwise, and the loans are electronically transferred to the collection agency you choose. So there's nothing for you to do other than putting together the business plan, putting together the approach, borrowing the money, and making sure that you know what it is you're buying and who you're buying from, and those kind of things. Remember those 5 things that we said we're going to spend the next 2 days talking about? You have to know them, but you don't have to worry about, gee, I can only do this if I live in the United States, or gee, I can only do this if I live in Utah, or gee, I can only do this if X. No, there are no rules. You can do this from anywhere on the globe as long as you're physically connected or technologically connected at least once a month to be able to go and enter your bids and do what's appropriate for you. So let's talk about some of the loans that are available. Megan, can we have handout number 1, please? All of the slides that we're going to be using over the course of the next 2 days, we will make available to you. We will send them to you if you send us an email. Here's the email address: speaker, S-P-E-A-K-E-R, at billbartman.com. Bartman has 2 N's in it because that's the way my family decided to spell it. Unless we're ordering pizza, then we use 1 N. So speaker at billbartman.com. And we will send you all these PowerPoints. Okay, the handout we've just given you, and there's going to be a series of these that we're going to give you over the course of the next couple of days. There are a whole litany of kinds and types of loans that are available. There's a whole litany of the kind and type of loans you could choose to buy. I showed all of these to you to warn you, I don't want you buying but one kind. So remember, this is about education. And education sometimes is not just telling you what to do, it's telling you what not to do. Because sometimes we have to be careful that a salesperson might make it all sound like, well, they're almost the same thing. They're almost as good as. Well, so that you know, this is the list, the general list of the kind of type of loans that are available for purchase across the United States on a regular basis. The only one I want you to get involved with is consumer credit cards. And I'm going to tell you why and how, and I'm going to explain there is a reason, a very good reason. It has to do with making a lot of money and not taking a lot of risk. Now, remember I started the conversation this morning, so we have to take some risk. Of course you do. But let's not take foolish risk. Let's not try to advance the cause so much that we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. So we're going to take one category of loans. When you get good at it, when you've done it a time or 2 or 3, and you have some experience under your belt, and then if you decide you want to go off the reservation and go do something else, great, I'll help you. Because I have purchased about every single category on that sheet I've just given you. There's some good stuff there. There's some good opportunities there, but not for the beginner. They are dangerous for the beginner. So let me get you out of the beginner's category before you run off and do that kind of stuff, because it'll hurt you. So let's talk about credit cards. And there are some reasons why this is where the money is. They're the most commonly available type of consumer loan. Every one of you understands credit cards. You've done it, you have one, you know what it's like to apply for one, you know what it's like to peel out that little sticky and call in that telephone number, you know what it's like to use it at a merchant, you know what it's like to pay your bill at the end of the month. You already know about 90% of everything you need to know about this business. You know the inventory up and down, back and forth. This would be like if you were an auto mechanic and getting in the car business. You already understand it. What you don't understand is about 10% of it. How do you collect it? How do you buy it and collect it from people that don't otherwise want to pay you? Well, that's the part we're going to teach you, but you do already know the business. Here's some interesting numbers, and again, we're going to give you all these PowerPoints so you don't have to struggle with them. The total U.S. consumer credit card was $1.4 trillion. That's not billion, that's trillion. That's 3 more zeros. That's 1,000 billions. I mean, it gets to be a number that we can't even figure out how many zeros we'd really string along. There's 12 in that whole proposition. Well, there's 1.5 billion credit cards in use in the United States presently. The Americans charge on their credit card $57,000 every second of every hour, every day. So if you aren't helping, shame on you. Today at lunch, go buy something. We have a reputation to maintain. 40% of American families spend more than they earn. The average American household is responsible for $18,000 in debt, excluding mortgages. So take the mortgage off the table, and there's still, most American families are $18,000 in debt. In the last 12 months, 34 million were late paying their credit card. 18 million people missed their payment entirely, and 58 million people in America admit to not paying all their bills on time. Welcome to a bad economy. So that's why there's inventory is absolutely just stacking up out there, these dead elephants, as we continue to use that example, because it's creating such a wonderful opportunity. Now, we aren't buying all of the credit cards out there. We're buying one piece of it, and there's some terminology involved, so let me walk you through it. In the banking industry, it's very well regulated, as you would imagine. After a loan becomes a certain number of days delinquent, the bank has to, under regulation, charge off the loan. So charge off is a term of art. And what it means is when a loan becomes typically 180 days delinquent, the bank charges it off its books and records. This is just an accounting process. It has nothing to do with the legal collectability. It has only to do with the bank posting it on their own books and records. So general accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, means that that loan goes from having whatever face value it had on the 179th day, and the bank could post it on its books and records, to zero the next day. So a customer who owes $10,000, and the bank shows it as a loan on their books and records, and it's part of their assets. And the loan is now 179 days delinquent because the customer just wouldn't pay. And on the 180th day, the bank has to write it down to zero. The bank still owns it. The bank can still call and collect. The bank can still try everything it can to get that customer to pay. But technically, as of that moment, the bank has to carry the loan at zero on its books and records. And it's like cars in a freight train. There's another one right behind it and another one right behind it. So every month, the industry charges off billions and billions of dollars. In August of 2007, the percentage of credit card loans that were being charged off was relatively normal. The typical rate is about 3%. Banks figure if they're not charging off at least 3% of their loans, they're probably not being aggressive enough. They need to put their money out. So in 2007, it climbed up to 4.8%, and banks got a little alarmed. If you remember, that was really the beginning of the bad economy. And then in 2008, the number went up to 6.8%, twice what it normally is during good times. In December of 2009, it hit 12.5%, or 400% over what it is during the good times. Any business in the world, when all of a sudden the volume of bad goes up 400%, that's a bad business to be in at the moment. And these are numbers, by the way, from Moody's, Fitch, and the Federal Reserve. But let's put that in dollar signs, because sometimes that's easier to understand. That same 4% in 2007 equaled $22 billion. In 2008, it was $76 billion. In 2009, it was $97 billion. And 2010, it was $107 billion. Now look at that. Now, whether we're talking billions or trillions or zillions or gazillions or whatever those are, think of what this is in terms of the amount of inventory and volume of inventory available, and look how it has increased from 2007 to 2010. Absolutely staggering. And here's the interesting part. In the last 4 years, from 2007 to now, the size of the collection industry has not changed. Oh, a little bit. Some businesses come, some businesses go. But in 2007, there were 6,000 collection agencies. In 2010, there were 6,000 collection agencies. Some of them have gotten a little bigger. A couple of them have gone public. A couple have gone out of business. Generally speaking, it's about the same amount of people in the business in 2010 it was in 2007, and the volume of inventory has increased 4 times. Now, guess what that does to pricing? The price is about half of what it used to be. So the very same bad assets you could buy in 2007 and go collect, you can buy in 2010 for about 50% of what they used to sell for. Now, does that smell like an opportunity? Absolutely it is. I mean, again, you don't have to be real smart. You just have to be in the right place at the right time and say, there's some things happening for which we have no control over. There's some things happening we had nothing to do with. There's some things happening that I am sorry they're happening, but because I see them happening and I recognize the opportunity, I'm going to take advantage of it. Well, that's exactly what it means. And so for all of us, it means an opportunity, or maybe even a tremendous opportunity. So for all of us who are going to be in the right place at the right time to take advantage of it, this is our chance to get in, get as much as we can before the economy gets better. And the economy will get better someday. Now, we don't know when. I mean, arguably, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, depending on who you listen to and what you think. And I'm good with you listening and thinking whatever you want. All I know is whatever we can get right now, they can't take back. Whatever we can get right now, we end up owning. Whatever we get right now, I hope that we see the economy getting better. Because if we're buying a big block of it now and the economy gets better in the next year, 2 or 3, those loans become more collectible. Because the people who had no capacity today will have some more capacity later. That's just part of the business. Okay, let's take a 15-minute break. We'll be back and we'll get into the next step. Thank you.